sure we've got a recording. Now we're recording. And obviously David Bolf, myself, John Mulder are available to ask questions and answer questions as we work our way through this significant project. A little bit of what you're seeing right now is a very preliminary schedule for the kind of plan of attack. And we're going to walk through some of the parts that have already happened on this and some of the parts that will happen. You're going to hear John Mulder in a moment talk about the city's financial management plan, which started way back in 2019, that have kind of led to where we are today and the ability to do some of these projects of this scale. As you can see, coming up on February 1st, we have the public hearing. The scope and size of this project have us doing steps fairly early in 2021 for a project that you wouldn't necessarily see being built until 2022. And David Bolf will be able to talk about specifics on that project as well as how we've arrived at this point. With that being said, a little bit of the history from myself before I turn it over to David and to John. But I do want to tell you that there is, even probably more history than 2019 on this, as we did a citywide inventory of roads back in 2015, and David will be able to talk about how, from the engineer's standpoint and from Paul Sent's standpoint in Public Works, we were able to grade and score.
Joe, you went muted now. Joe, we can't hear you. Joe, we can't hear you. I'm going to walk across the room to make sure that Joe,
You've got.
Okay, you're back.
Yeah, and so everybody knows, David and John have seen a little bit of this. My particular device is sometimes very friendly with Zoom and occasionally not. So if we do run into those spots again, please, David, John, others, wave your hands. I'll jump back and unmute. It won't be award-winning work, but it'll still get all done. Let me get back to the screen sharing piece. Multiple community engagement surveys that I've done in my role over the last several years are always probably going to flag roads as our biggest opportunity for improvement. And for the longest time, there wasn't a very good mechanism in town to be able to tackle these big projects. It was kind of a fix it as we go approach. But John, in a moment, will talk about the financial management plan that in 2019 made it possible for us to do projects like Ugstad Road, Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander, the project we finished in 2020 that you'll reference, you'll hear today, and Levake Junction, and a few other roads that we're going to do in 2021. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to David Bolf, our city engineer, and he can start us back on the history side of things of how we inventoried our roads here in Hermantown. David?
All right. Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is David Bolf. I'm this Hermantown city engineer. I recognize some of the names on the list tonight, so nice to see some old faces that I haven't talked to in a while. But so back in 2015, myself and the Public Works Director inventoried all the roads under Hermantown's jurisdiction, and we came up with a ranking system from 1 to 5, and 1 being a new, well-functioning road, 5 being a failing road, and the 2s, 3s, and 4s are somewhere in between there. So then we looked at, when we ranked these roads, what type of improvement strategy would we use for each type of road. So the roads that are ranked 1 and 2, we classify those as a preservation project, which extends the life of the road. Roads 3 are, beyond preservation, but need appropriate attention, which would be like a mill and overlay or a reclaim and overlay. And then roads 4 and 5 would trigger typically a full reconstruction. So of the roads that we inventoried, we had 164 different road segments, and we had 45 over gravel, 73 which are rural bituminous, and rural means that it has ditches opposed to the urban sections which have curb, gutter, sidewalk, storm sewer. And then we have 26 municipal state aid segments. So our Ugstad Road, the meeting that we're having here tonight, and Arrowhead, both are fall under 3 of these categories: a rural bituminous, a urban bituminous, and a state aid segment. So the importance of the state aid is we get, state aid for it. And on this specific project, we were eligible for some federal aid funding. And I'll get into that explanation a little bit further, but we can go to the next slide, Joe. So again, we rank these are improvement strategies for roads that are ranked 3 through 5, which are Ugstad Road. All the segments we rank these were a 3. So we have a mill and overlay on part of it, a reclaim and overlay part of it. And as we get into the different segments, we do have a small section that we're planning to reconstruct. So I guess we can go to the next slide here, Joe.
When the president's sworn into office.
And at this point, we'll turn it over to John Mulder, City Administrator, who can walk us through the financial management plan and how funding for these particular roads, as well as a lot of things we do across Hermantown in terms of city government, have come into being since 2019. John?
Yeah, so actually, started in 2018, and then I think at the very beginning of 2019, we completed a financial management plan, and it really was a multi-year plan for all of our tax-supported funds, and trying to look at how do we fit all of these pieces together. So we looked at existing debt and future debt. We looked at our capital improvement plans. We looked at future operating expenses, including staff and just other improvements that needed to be made, and just operationally. We looked at tax-based growth, and we looked at our financial reports and our current financial policies. And we kind of reviewed all of those things with the help of an outside consultant, and Ellers is our financial advisor. And it helps us to then manage kind of what things can we take on? What things do we think can fit into the services that are provided and that we need to provide? How do we maintain our assets? We've got some beautiful assets. We don't want those to fall into disrepair because we just neglected to maintain them. But it also then provides some clarity and reactionary approaches to our needs. So we tried to look at that at a more proactive approach to how do we best manage all of those needs that we have and all of the financial tools that we have at our disposal. And we talked about that kind of, just because we saw, and Joe mentioned that a little bit, is like roads in our surveys, we were not dealing with roads the way we ought to. We were not planning for those city streets to be improved. And so we looked at all of those different items on how we could address that need of improving our city streets. So one of the things we looked at was all of the different funding options. So if you go to the next slide, Joe, is we discussed different ways that we could pay for the road improvements. And these are the generally big funding buckets that we have to work with. So we could use road assessments, which is one of the things that we're proposing to do. And we've used on Johnson, Carlson, Alexander, that neighborhood in 2020. We're looking at doing that same thing on Levake Junction in 21, and then also Sunbee and Swan Lake in 21 as well. So we also could use general tax levy. We could just, put it on the levy and pay for it. We typically do that through a bonding process. And so instead of paying for it all at once, we go out and borrow the money, and then we levy that money, that debt payment over time, just like you would do your house. You don't budget for your entire house in 1 year, but you budget for the payments on the debt. So we get municipal state aid for roads, but that can only be used for certain roads. It can't be used for all city streets. There's a lot of talk in Hermantown always about local government aid. The simple fact is we don't receive it. You know, the city of Duluth gets millions of dollars in local government aid. Hermantown doesn't, and primarily because of our housing stock is too new and our tax base is fairly high. Sales tax. We have a sales tax, but we can only use that for what the legislature puts into the law that allows us to. So we can do the trunk sewer, we can do upgrades to our water system. We built the City Hall and the Wellness Center for that. But otherwise, we can't use sales tax for any other fund. The water utility, the stormwater utility, sanitary sewer, and the streetlight utility are all dedicated revenues for specific purposes. And on any given road project, we might be doing some of these things. And so we'll use some of those funds for those projects. So if we're going to make an improvement, you know, on a city street that also includes, you know, replacing a water main, we could use that water utility fund theoretically for that purpose as well. We need to put in some additional street lights or replace some street lights, we can use that street light fund. So those are the kind of the different sources that we could use. But the two primary ones are the road assessments and the general tax levy. And on this project, we're also able to use that state aid, municipal state aid. So David, I'm going to turn it back to you to talk, or I don't know if is David or Joe's going to go to the next slide.
We're going to turn it over to David because we've got a kind of a coverage on how we've ranked roads, and we've got an idea from John on how we are paying for some of these projects we've had and how we are looking at Ugstad Road. I'll have David dive into what our roads really look like and a little bit more about this project. Go ahead, David.
Okay, thank you, Joe. So again, the slide before us here is our city's rural road standards, which is a 24-foot wide road with 2-foot shoulders. That's the minimum. As we all know, Ugstad and Arrowhead are both wider than that, mostly because they are state aid, and there's a little bit higher level of standard that comes along with the state aid road. So just wanted to kind of share that. That's the minimum. We're not proposing that on this project, but we have state aid standards that we need to design to on this project. So this kind of dives us right into the costs. We've, as part of our feasibility study, we estimated the costs for, that includes the construction costs, what we call the soft costs of engineering, the permitting, easements, legal proceedings, and contingency. So the bottom line is about a $3.6 million project. And then kind of building on what John presented earlier was how we're going to fund that 3.6 million. So the funding sources kind of break down into assessments, local funding, the federal funding. We have funding that's earmarked for 2024 of $1.48 million, and then our municipal state aid account would pay for about $1.3 million of the project. So that's how you can see we have the cost of 3.6 and then the funding of how we're proposing to pay for that $3.6 million.
David, I can speak to this because this is a common question that comes up, which is, okay, so we can talk about the 9750, but let's also get it squared away to what it feels like before that discussion comes up. We're into the first version of these assessments on the first part of the road improvement plan that we did in 2020 with Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander residents, as well as a stretch of Hermantown Road. There were a handful of those folks that did come into City Hall and write a check for $9,750 in the last 2 months of 2020 and knocked out the entire assessment. But that's obviously pretty rare. So the way that most folks experience an assessment like this is we've worked out financing through the city for 15 years at 4%. And that equals basically $876.93 on your property taxes. So it isn't a check once a year to us. It's just something that gets taken care of in your property taxes. So when we have questions coming up about the 9750 and where that number is and what it feels like, here's another really good way to think about what that will feel like when we have the ability to spread it over 15 years and include it in your property taxes.
And Joe, the important thing to remember on that assessment is that that doesn't become payable until after the project is completed.
It's true.
So because this one is, again, because of the complexity and the size of this, we're doing a lot of pre-planning right now for construction in 22, with the assessment not taking effect until 2023. So you've got a full 21 and 20, full two years before you would see that on your property taxes.
Yeah, and that's a part that, John, I know was something that everybody worked really hard for, because we did not want to deal with any of the assessments before the road was completed. The product, so to speak, was going to be done before anybody had to pay for it.
Right.
David, I think we're back to you on some project specificity.
Yeah, so again, as part of our road inventory and financial management plan, we recognize the need to evaluate and budget and repair Ugstad Road, and it kind of overflowed on a little part of Arrowhead Road as well. So what were the contributing factors for that? Are added traffic from the wellness center, the schools, the new ECFE building. We also have that multifamily building that's being built right now up by 53 in Ugstad. There's various locations where the storm sewer is heaved, and we want to repair those. Various segments of the pavement are in disrepair, meaning they need to be replaced. Part of this improvement of this corridor is the pedestrian safety, especially in the school zone and now the wellness center. The intersection of Ugstad and Arrowhead Road, there's inadequate or no turn lanes, so we're proposing to make some improvements there. And then the part of the master park plan indicates part of this corridor to house the new what we're calling Munger Trail Connector. So with that, Joe, we can go to the next slide. So this is, if we can get everybody's orientation here, this represents the project in its entirety, broken down into segments. So to get your bearings, the left side, you can kind of see Maple Grove. So north is to the right on here, with Highway 53 being at the top or at the right-hand side. So hopefully everybody can get their bearings on here. So we broke this down into 7 distinct and different segments. Segment 1 being from Maple Grove Road up to Levake Road. And I'm gonna go into further detail on each of these segments. So this slide is just kind of a high level overview. Then segment 2 is from Levake Junction up to Arrowhead Road. Segment 3 is from Arrowhead up to Falcon Drive. Segment 4 is from Falcon Drive up to Williams Drive. And then segment 5 is Williams Drive up to Highway 53. And then on Arrowhead Road, we have segments 6 and 7, which are from the entrance to the elementary school to Ugstad Road, and then from Ugstad Road to the Filkey Circle, that new road that was built 2 years ago. So with that, Joe, let's jump into further detail on segment 1. So again, segment 1 is from Maple Grove Road to Levake Junction. This segment, we're planning a mill and overlay. So what does that mean? We remove the top 3 to 4 inches of bituminous and we repave it. There will be a couple of cross culvert replacements that we'll do as part of that. We will also widen the sidewalk on the east side to 5 feet. The ADA rules that are in effect dictate that we need to make these improvements. The existing sidewalk is only 4 feet wide, and that's why we need to make it another foot wider for 5 feet. And then each of the intersections with Lake Junction and Maple Grove Road will have to redo the pedestrian ramps that have the proper slopes and the truncated domes there. And
Just
also,
a quick clarification. ADA stands for the Americans with Disability Act. Sometimes we use acronyms and we forget, like those could mean different things for different people, but that's what that means is the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, sorry, David.
thanks for the clarification. And then as part of this, this overall project, we're calling it a reconditioning project, and the reconditioning is defined by MnDOT state aid, and we can up to 25% of the curb and gutter can be replaced under that reconditioning rule. So on Ugstad Road, we're planning to replace, as close to that 25% of the curb as we can. So it'll be kind of spot repairs where it's cracked or a driveway doesn't tie in correctly, or where we have a catch basin that we replace. Those are the areas that we will be doing the spot curb and gutter replacement. Yep, thank you. Next slide here is segment 2. So this is Lake Junction to Arrowhead Road. So this is, you can kind of see in the picture here, we got this is the wellness center kind of under construction here. So obviously before the snow came, this section we're planning a mill and overlay as well. Probably the biggest difference on this segment 2 is we're proposing a new 10-foot wide paved multi-use trail on the west side. So where we see a 4-foot sidewalk today, we're proposing a 10-foot wide paved trail on that side. And that would go from Lake Junction up on this segment up to Arrowhead Road. And then also we'll make some turn lane improvements at this intersection with the right turn lane and a left turn lane as well. So this is segment 3, and this is the segment that gets used the most because of the school Hawk Circle Drive there. And this segment is the segment we are planning to do a full reconstruction. So what does that mean? We'll be excavating down 3 feet, putting new granular material, new storm sewer, new curb and gutter on both sides. And then again, on the west side, which is the top of your screen here, that orange line would be the 10-foot multi-use trail. As part of this too, we would add a lane. So there would be a shared center turn lane. So if you're north or southbound, you could get in that shared center left turn lane and either turn into Hawk Circle Drive or to the entrance to the hockey arena. So this is one of the things that came out of the traffic study that we did at the end of last year. So that's what we're planning to do on segment 3 here. And that will carry up to, it goes off the picture a little bit, but a little bit further north up to Falcon Drive. And then we'll also be adding, if you're on Ugstad Road traveling south from Highway 53, there will be a dedicated right turn lane into Hawk Circle Drive as well. Okay, we'll go to segment 4. So segment 4 is a rural section, again, and that's from Falcon Drive up north to Williams Drive. This section does not have curb and gutter today. We're planning to reclaim and overlay that. So the difference between a reclaim and overlay and a mill and overlay is a reclaim grinds up the bituminous and mixes it in with the underlying gravel base, Whereas a mill, you remove it and you put in new. So that's the nice thing about the rural sections is you can reclaim it, use that, and build a better solid base for your new road. And then we're proposing to put a new sidewalk on the west side, and that sidewalk would go from Hawk Circle Drive all the way up to Highway 53. And then this is the last segment on Ugstad Road. And again, this is from Williams Drive up to Trunk Highway 53. This section has curb and gutter on it already. So that's why we do a mill and overlay of that piece. And then also add new sidewalk on the west side. And in 2019, the county and MnDOT and the city of Hermantown had a cooperative agreement, and we did some improvements at this intersection. Part of that project, we put a 6-foot sidewalk on the LeBake bypass on the county side of this. So our new sidewalk would tie in to that. And there's already a crossing at Highway 53 that we put in as part of that project. Okay, so this is section number 6 or segment 6. And this is so we're looking up as east on this photo. So on Arrowhead Road, what we're proposing to do is build a dedicated left turn lane into Hawk Circle Drive. So that the thought there is the two peak morning drop-offs for the elementary and then the middle and high school will allow cars to get in a protected left turn lane. So the people that are eastbound, you don't have to back up and wait for them. And it'll also provide a gap then for people on Hawk Circle Drive to get out of that. And then what we would plan to do is mill and overlay from that point east to Ugstad Road. And then the last segment is segment 7. This is we're at the intersection of Ugstad looking east down Arrowhead. We're proposing to build a new right turn lane, extend it further east towards Thilke Circle just to provide a little bit more stacking. So that's a pretty short turn lane. And then we would mill and overlay the rest of that up to Thilke Circle. And the intersection would obviously get new curb and gutter, and then also the ADA ramps that we would replace.
We'll open this up for questions in just a moment. But again, and I'm going to stop with the screen share, but we can always open this back up if there's questions. But our goals today, obviously, we're to kind of kick things off with the Ugstad Road project well in advance of the projected 2022 construction season, and kind of clue you in on what we're hoping to accomplish with it and some of the reasons why. Obviously, summarize from David's perspective the work that's already been done for the traffic study, and let him dive into the why we're doing what we're doing, and certainly start to create some preliminary understanding of project impacts and timelines. And I know there'll be some questions about that. Let me close down the sharing piece. I did have to mute a handful of you just to be sure when we were going. I'm going to unmute as many folks as want, so we can kind of open it up. And we might have that moment in a moment where a few folks are talking over each other, but I'll kind of call on folks for questions. While I'm unmuting these, John, the question came in over the chat, which I was already able to answer for the individual, but it's a really good question for everybody, which is if there are changes to the project scope, or David finds something different than expected underneath the ground, and the cost of this change, do the proposed assessment of $9,750, does that go up as well?
No, the assessment will stay the same no matter what the project cost is. We run into situations where it's like, hey, we got to do more soil corrections than we thought, or more work than we thought on a particular one, we'll have to use that out of either, our state aid revenue, our federal revenue to the extent that we have that, or other sources. But the 9750 is a hard number. That's not going to go up or down based upon the total cost of the project.
Perfect. Thank you, John. And then beyond that, let's open it up. Again, we've got everybody. Most, I think, of the muting is done on your side, to the public side. So if somebody has a question, they can hop in, unmute themselves, and fire away. Obviously, a lot of mileage covered on this project compared to other ones. The full stretch of Ugstad Road from the ballparks all the way up to 53, and pretty significant changes, important changes, and safety changes to that intersection.
Let me just add a couple of comments, Joe, as I'm thinking about this. This stretch of road is probably, one of the main entrances into the community as you come into the interior of the community, and is really a center of the community, given the school, the hockey arena, the wellness center, and even Fickner Park. So that's why it's important that we need to do this. And the other big part of this is wanting to improve pedestrian access. That's been kind of a goal that we've been talking about, for a number of years now, is how do we improve pedestrian access to these facilities? And so that's what we're trying to do here, is trying to, fix up this main corridor to kind of one of our community centers, but also then improve pedestrian access to those community centers as well. So that's kind of a very big picture kind of policy issue that we're trying to get to when we look at doing this road project.
John, a question that's come in, and we've kind of answered it through the history of the project, but I'd rather have you answer it again, is, hey, is this project being driven by the new development on the corner of 53 and Ugstad? And obviously, as we've kind of outlined, it's not, but I'd love for you to speak to that, John.
Yeah, I mean, that project kind of came in probably about a year and a half, actually, after we had started the conversation because of doing this road. We've had this stretch of Ugstad under kind of review for some time, primarily when the school was built. This section of road took a major beating with all the heavy truck traffic. And so we've been looking at that for some time. And, and then we also had to apply for that federal aid. And so that federal aid was done probably about the same time that this building project of the apartment complex was coming on the same line. So it's like, yeah, does it serve the multifamily units? Certainly. But it's not being done because of that. Whether that project, the apartment project, would have happened or not, we had this thing scheduled for 2022, 2023, that time period. And now because of just the timing of it, 2022 works out to be the best year for us to do that.
Perfect. Question from the folks in the audience, and I know this will go right to some of the work, David, you do. I'm supportive of the project as a whole, and I like to hear about these improvements. My question is, if personal landscaping and trees are affected, what happens? David, could you talk us through a little bit about how that works, and also what is in play in terms of how we do our construction and what isn't?
Yeah, good question. So this is, like we've said tonight a few different times, we have federal and state aid that's going to help fund this project. Along with that is we'll call it a playbook or a set of rules that we need to design to in order to get our state and federal aid funding. So part of that says that we have to do all the work within the right of way that we have or obtain easements to do work along that right of way. So the question came up is, if I have landscaping, if it's in your front yard and it's on private property, we're not going to be there unless we need to secure an easement. If you have a tree that's planted in the right of way or some you know, a decorative rock garden or a fence that's in the right of way. That right of way is our corridor to make the improvements. So that scenario has played out a few different times this past year and on the project we're going to construct this year. So there's a couple different ways we've been able to deal with that. And I'll give an example of the rock garden. Somebody had a rock garden and they opted to remove all the rocks by hand and put it in their yard. And once the project was done, they opted to put the rocks back. Another one example is a fence that was in the ditch bottom. We had to dig a new ditch and the fence, we didn't allow the fence to go back in the ditch bottom. So the fence had to go back on the property line. So to answer that question, if there's, we'll call it private improvements within the right of way, the design teams, probably myself or Joe as well, will be in contact with those specific individuals and kind of lay out what the city's planned improvements are for the roadway, and then how we can deal with those you know, private improvements. So typically it's up to the homeowner if they want to salvage them to do that on their time and effort ahead of the project, because once we come through with the backhoe, the backhoes aren't friendly for salvaging anything in its way.
I can tell you from our Portland, Carlson, Johnson experience this year, David's, and you'll see a lot of me in this project, and you'll get to know me as your conduit for information. But David also being able to come out and walk you through what's possible if you know, you've got a sizable tree and it's on. It's definitely in the right of way, what's possible, or if it's just simply not possible to keep it, or if there's a tree that its roots beds are going to be impacted by some of the work we do. So a lot of times what we heard originally was the fear was that we were going to have folks wake up one morning and we will have just mowed right through and all of that'll be gone. And I can promise you both from work I'll be doing on this project and David will be doing on this project, that any kind of changes that happen, you'll have a huge heads up on, and any kind of specificity will be able to come out at the right date and stand with you on your property and walk you through how that impact will work. Our goal is for you to have an incredibly good experience during this time. In that same line and in that same vein of communication, you'll also get updates on you know, road closures, road access, when you'll be able to get in and out of places. For example, a much more tricky project logistically in terms of corners and curves and different neighborhood was the Portland, Carlson, Alexander stretch. And we were able to get it down to the exact times when folks would know the bituminous machinery that was laying the new pavement was going to be right in front of their house. So as long as you stayed connected to us and followed along on the website, you would have a really good idea that you would never get stuck in your driveway. David, a little bit of a question for you. And I've got a few folks with questions coming into the chat, so I'll cycle through those before I open it up to anybody who wants to speak. But can you be more specific, David, to what a 10-foot paved trail will look like on that second section, on section 2, particularly for the residents, obviously, that live on the west side of Ugstad between Levake and the Wellness Center?
So it's a good question. So what we're proposing there is that the curb and gutter that's in place today will be in the same location. Most likely it'll be new on the west side, and the 10-foot would be, we haven't decided, but it would be either concrete or bituminous. Most likely this segment would be concrete, and that would be right behind the curb. So if you can envision St. Louis County, when they redid Maple Grove Road last year, they paved a 10-foot trail in front of Stebner Park, the soccer fields there. So that's the same feel that this trail would have. And again, we have not decided whether it's going to be blacktop or concrete, but it'll be one of those two part of that, we have a grant and it dictates the width of the trail, and it's got to be a hard surface. It cannot be gravel.
What is and this might be both a David and a John question, what is the projected speed limit for each section or for the project as a whole? And well, let's start with that. Let's go into speed limits before I ask the second part of the question.
So right now we are not proposing any change in the speed limit along any of the 7 project segments. As part of the traffic study that was prepared at the end of last year, that was one of the things we asked the consultant to look at. And at that point, there was the recommendation was not to change the speed limit in any of the segments. So, and unless there's a design criteria that would dictate that we adjust
and commutations. Some of those
we would not be changing the speed limit.
David, what's the impact again to existing residential properties on the east and west sides of the road in section 1? That's the section closest to the ball field, I believe.
So again, the curb is not changing. The location of the curb is not changing. The biggest impact in segment 1 would be to the residents that live on the east side. There's a 4-foot curb and gutter, or there's a 4-foot sidewalk behind the curb and gutter. That will be different. That will be 5 feet in the future as part of this project. So it's still within our right of way that we have, but it would just be 1 foot more of concrete towards your house or garage.
Thanks, David. John, I think this one tees you up. The presentation talked obviously about the 9750 divided by, I think 70 or 75 residents. Is this based on the number of homes along the affected stretch? And in that same vein, do the wellness center, apartments, school, do they see any different splits on this particular project? Obviously, Ugstad Road benefits a lot of people.
Yeah, so the number of houses that we used was, we just looked at every property and we listed all the properties. Ultimately, will that be the final number? Maybe, maybe not. We sent notices to the school district, and the wellness center is owned by the city. So we sent notices of this project to them to keep them informed, but we will likely not assess the school district or the wellness center. And the reason we don't do that is, where's the school district going to get money? They're going to get it from you through the taxes. So we didn't see any point of, assessing them only for them to put it on their tax roll and have you pay for it. So that's kind of what we did with the public property. We'll have to look at some of these parcels because some of them may not be accessible just because of, if they don't have a house on them or if they're not buildable. We'll have to look at some of those things. What was the other part of that question?
The complex being put in at the end.
Yeah, and at this point, we've tagged them at 9750 at this point.
When we talk about the walkway, this might be a John question. Tell me more about it. Who maintains that? Is there lights on it? How does that get dealt with in the winter with snow and ice? Is that sidewalk treated differently, and is the 10-foot section treated differently than other sections of sidewalk in Hermantown?
Well, what I would imagine is that one, we probably will not have any additional lights on that sidewalk than there's currently out there right now. In terms of the trail that we are looking at throughout the city, is we are making plans to have that plowed of snow in the winter. Certainly, we're going to do the roads first, right? We're going to do the streets and roads first, but our plan is to try to clear that sidewalk and that trail as part of our snow operations.
And that, John, is part of in the greater scheme of things, part of the ideally citywide trail that's being constructed. That'll be a non-motorized accessible trail that'll go really from Highway 53, eventually all the way down to Keene Creek.
That's correct.
I think I am through all of the questions in the chat. Does anybody have, and feel free to put more in the chat, does anybody else have any questions that they want to ask in the live forum? Feel free to jump right in. You don't have to raise your hand. You can unmute yourself and just start talking.
Yes, I was wondering
Yeah.
if they were going to change the speed limit on that at all from 30 miles an hour, or increase it or decrease it because of the school, and you get an improved road there, you know, people like to drive fast.
David, you want to tackle the speed limit piece again for us, please?
Yeah, again, we are not proposing any changes to the speed limits that exist today. And it's twofold. One is from the traffic study that we had done earlier, or at the end of last year. We had the consultant give us some, they looked at the speed study there, and they advised us to keep the speed as it is. And then secondly, there would have to be some kind of a design criteria, or that would predicate us to adjust the speed limit. And we don't see that right now. There's not, this road section is pretty straight and flat, and there's not a horizontal or vertical curve that would tell us that we need to adjust the speed limit.
Perfect,
Question
that's
that
what I
came
was
in.
hoping for.
Yeah, I'm Rick. I live here on the Ugstad Road, just off of the Arrowhead. And I had a little technical difficulty, so I missed part of the presentation. But what I would like to see, and it would not be difficult when you send these letters to me, to everyone, what's the matter with sending a little drawing? I could see a little bit of the drawing here, but I really didn't have a chance to study it, and I had that technical problem. That's not your fault. But I would like to have a proposal sent to me, or a drawing sent to me, could see, because from what I understand, and I missed part of it, they're gonna extend a sidewalk across the street, which is brand new across from me, by the way. Okay, so you're gonna extend that a little bit, and then there's gonna be a trail. Where's this trail gonna go? I missed that on part of the thing, if you even covered it. I don't know, I was gone, so not your fault there. But this is a pretty a pretty poor time in my mind, when we got this pandemic and money is tight right now, and you keep adding. When I first heard about this proposal, it was only supposed to go as far as from 53 to Ugstad Road. Now it's going all over. You got new trails, you got widening sidewalks that are existing, are brand new across the street from me, because I'm right by the health center. And so somebody's got visions of grandeur here, and they're taking off with this stuff. And you're right in the middle of pandemic when money is tight. So, okay, that's my rundown.
Yeah, let me give you a couple answers. One, the ability, anyone who wants any particular information about this can certainly connect with me, Joe Wickland. My contact information is all over our website, and I'm in City Hall, even in the pandemic, pretty regularly. Also, this particular presentation and the details of it are going to be posted on our website in the next few days. I bet it will be tomorrow, but I want to give myself a little wiggle room on other projects as to information on this. So idea of pictures, Rick, or more specificity in your neck of the woods, we'll absolutely be able to do that, since we're just at the starting point. Certainly the pandemic isn't a convenient time to do anything. I think we can all agree. In this particular juncture, though, part of the good part about this particular project is because of the size, scope, and complexity of it, we're talking about 2022 for the work, and the costs or any assessments associated with it not being a part of the occasion in 2023. Let's, at least at this point, cross our fingers that we're all in a better place with the pandemic, at least at that point. I would imagine, of course, we still, that's a significant chunk of change, whether it's 2021 or 2022 or 2023, but at least that certainly gives us some breathing room. So The other questions, David, I think we've covered the trail pieces a little bit, but just to reiterate, could you guide us quickly through why we have some sidewalk changes on the ADA pieces, and then a little bit about that multi-use trail on that small section from Levake Junction to Arrowhead?
So I'll try to answer your question as best I can, Rick, in that, so there's sidewalk, a couple different vintages on the west side of Ugstad, along the school district property and the wellness property. So there will
David,
be.
while you're talking, I'm going to try and call up that segment too.
Okay, the trail will be in lieu of the sidewalk. So there's not going to be a 5-foot sidewalk and then a 10-foot trail. And if I didn't make that clear, I'll make it clear now. So
I missed part of it. So go ahead.
So the 4-foot sidewalk that exists today does not meet the ADA requirement. So we have to increase it to 5 feet to meet those standards. Instead of doing that in this section, we're proposing to build our 10-foot wide trail there. So instead of having a 5-foot sidewalk, we're going to have a 10-foot trail. So if you can see your screen here, this is a section we're talking about. And
Yeah,
yes,
that mailbox is my mailbox right there.
okay. So yes, there's unfortunately there's some sacrificial sidewalk that went in with the wellness center, but the big picture is that needed to be there in order to have a accessible route to the wellness center. So it had to go in, day one. So another piece to this puzzle on the trail is that the city has to find funding sources for this trail, and a lot of it's been through grants. And this federal aid project allows us another funding mechanism. So we're using our state aid and or federal aid to fund this trail rather than having to secure a grant to do that.
Okay, can I ask you a quick question here on that trail? Now, okay, it's going to come across. Is this trail going to continue down Ugstad Road, or does it cut off? Where does the trail go? Like I say, I missed part of the presentation, so you probably covered it, but I didn't get it. So it's going to be right down across from me, and then it's going to continue down all the way to Maple Grove. The trail is, or what?
This trail is part of our parks master plan, and we know the starting point is the school, the wellness center, and the ending point is the Keene Creek at the end of Okerstrom Road. So we've built a couple segments. We're building one this year. We're building one next year, and we know from A to B, but the intermediates we're working on securing easements for that. So as part of this project, the trail is going from Hawk Circle Drive on the west side of Ugstad down to Levake Junction, and it'll stop at Levake Junction. And then that's part of the city's next step in this is trying to figure out the route from Levake Junction back over to Stebner Park. We have some preliminary alignments that we're working on, but a big part of this trail is getting the necessary easements to construct it.
And at that point, at Levake Junction, people can cross at the intersection and go on that 5-foot sidewalk on the other side as if they want to walk down to Fickner Park.
Right. And that's the people that are moving in down there at the, a lot of the people that are moving in that apartment building down there are going to be utilizing all this stuff, all the sidewalks and everything. On that trail, once again, somebody told me, and from what you're telling me now, that's not the case, that they were going to go, there's a gas line behind me that cuts across there. Is that trail was not going to intersect with that and carry on down? Where a gas line goes
But
behind
sewer line.
Pardon?
I think it's a sewer line behind you.
Yeah, okay, sewer line, yeah, I'm sorry.
So the trail is not going to go on the sewer line behind you, but that might be one of the corridors, you know, once it gets off of south of LeBake Junction, that is one of the corridors we are looking at.
Okay.
Couple of other questions. John, I want to get you this one because I know you're pressed for time. Any difference in people that own homes compared to empty lots or lots, you know, folks who access Ugstad that are further up roads, say like Roosevelt or things like that, access to, and is there access to the walkway from non-landowners, parking places, things like that, outside of obviously, you know, the ability to use the Wellness Center parking lot, Fichtner Park, things like that?
Yeah, so you had a couple of questions going on there. One is, we're only looking at assessing those properties that abut the road. So if you have, if your property doesn't, you know, isn't up against the road, you're not being assessed. So people, you know, several houses into, on Roosevelt, they're not being assessed. There will be, we're not gonna have any additional dedicated parking spots for jumping on the sidewalk or the trail. But you will be able to, you know, park at the school complex or the wellness center or Fichtner Park and jump on the sidewalk and trails and you know, take a walk with your neighbor or friend or something like that. So we're not going to add any, you know, like trailheads or anything like that to this project, but you will have access to it if you want to park at the wellness center and or the school district buildings.
The question that came in about the opportunity to pay the assessment at completion, but rather than putting it on your taxes, yes. For example, this year, like I said, we had probably a handful of folks on the Portland, Carlson, Johnson, Alexander, Hermantown section of roads that we did during the construction season of 2020 that paid the full $97.50 this November, December. Here at City Hall. There'll be a window in which you can do that because of some process pieces we have to go through with the city council. But when that window is open, should all of this follow the schedule we plan in the very end of 2022, so much more than a year away, we'll make sure that you know that if your preference is to pay the full $97.50. Kind of just a discussion point, maybe John, something for us to think about on the city side, but it was noted that assessing the school district would spread to a greater population, which seems reasonable and fair because the city gets so significant a benefit. Why shouldn't they shoulder and spread a larger portion of the cost? That seems reasonable and fair. Is that a possible choice for the city to assess the school?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. That's a conversation that we could have with the school district. It's a possibility.
And as John mentioned, to a certain degree, it comes back, you know, to you in that manner, but at least it also spreads out to everybody. Part of our bigger process, so that everybody knows on these road improvement projects, was not that people wouldn't experience a road assessment twice. You just have the Ugstad Road during the Ugstad Road, Johnson Road if you lived on Johnson Road. So there's a certain degree of everybody being in it together. Question, David, just to be clear, the trail, and I'm going to read this as is, David, and then you can explain.
Yeah, I see the comments here too.
Yeah,
Joe.
so to be clear, the trail will be taking up 6 feet of property butted against the 4-foot current section of sidewalk in section 1, which is right away, so it's not really property, but I'll let you answer it.
So, yeah, and I see further down, Julie meant section 2, which is from LeBake Junction to Arrowhead Road. So what we're proposing is replacement of that 4-foot walk with a 10-foot trail. So roughly, without doing a survey, from the back of the curb to the property line is about 15 feet. So that current sidewalk takes up 4 feet of that 15, and we would propose a 10-foot there. So we still have another 5 feet of right of way to work within. So there's some power poles on that west side. That would be about where the property line is. And what hasn't been said tonight, and I want to make clear to everybody, that the city of Hermantown is hiring a consultant to do the design of this roadway for us, and also the construction, inspection, and engineering of this. So once we have that consultant on board, where we're, if we need any easements, or if we have any place where we have to like mark the trail, what I would propose is we would mark where this trail is going to go, put some lath in people's front yards, let them digest that, then call Joe or myself, and we can kind of walk you through what the expectation is, you know, when this is all said and done.
And I shared that screen just so, again, people could see what they're talking about. The, David, a quick question. The section of sidewalk beyond Hawk Circle on the way to Highway 53, that's going to be a 5-foot section, not a 10-foot section, correct?
Okay, so what we will commit to today, because of the grant, is we know that the trail is going to be 10 feet wide. We know that the sidewalk from Maple Grove up to LeBake Junction needs to be a minimum of 5 feet, and that's what we're proposing. So the question about what do we do from Hawk Circle Drive north up to Highway 53, we originally had proposed a 10-foot trail. After further review, we don't think that's the best fit for this section of road, because of wetlands, because of easements, because of proximity of homes to the road. So what we're proposing is to put a sidewalk, and at a minimum it'll be 5 feet, and probably at the maximum it would be 6 feet. And the reason kind of why we're leaning towards a 6 foot is that's what's lines up on the north side of Highway 53 that the county built. So it's going to be in that 5 to 6 foot range.
I want to give everybody a heads up that John Mulder had to leave. We'll still certainly answer questions. If there's something that's more up his alley, I'll take it down and make sure to get back to you on the answer. I do want everybody to know we will take a look at the school piece as an option. It'll certainly be a discussion point coming out of this meeting. Obviously, that's an important point. I do also want to point out that isn't, just as we at least start out on the same point, that isn't likely to lower your individual assessment. It's just likely to spread the cost out of the project, if that's something we could explore. But at least, you know, will certainly be a discussion point, as that 9750 number is a pretty solid constant across all of these projects. That's what the folks on Portland, Carlson, Alexander were assessed. It was also the plan, and is the current plan, for the folks on the Lake Junction, Sunby, Swan Lake, et cetera. So, but we'll definitely continue that school discussion coming out of this meeting. Any other, I think I've gone through everybody in the chat. Any other questions on the public side of things? Anyone else? Rick, I see you've got a hand up, but I want to make sure that you've got all your questions answered too. Do you have any more questions?
No, you covered it. Thank you.
Awesome.
I'll probably be getting in touch with you. I really want to take a look at a drawing where I can see it in front of me and look. My screen is not real big where I can see much detail. So I'll be getting in touch with you. Okay. Perfect.
And for folks who do want to contact me and David, our contact information is on the website outlined in the letter. It's hermantownmn.com, which is the city's website, /roads. So anybody who's interested in reaching out and connecting with me and David for any variety of questions on this project, or to be honest, in my role, any questions you've got about anything going on in Hermantown, I'm a great touch point on that. That way we don't end up confused or there's something you're not wondering about or are wondering about that you want clarity on this particular project or another one. I want you to be able to reach out. Any other last questions that anybody else has here before we wrap up? Anyone? I don't see any. So I want to reiterate what kind of what Rick said in his questions. It's a super challenging time, everybody. So I appreciate you carving out time and space and joining us and really being helpful in this process. And this is really kind of the first step in a larger process for this project as well as others. So please stay in touch with it. As you have questions, again, find me, find David, or any one of us who can help you out. We will have, if you remember that original screenshot of calendar, we've got at least 2 more of these scheduled later on as the design phase comes much more into focus. And then David and I will also be, like I said, as we get closer in your neighborhood and potentially meeting with you one-on-one to walk through questions you might have or impacts that you have in the yard. In your particular yard. One quick question that came in, what were the reasons those on Roosevelt were not assessed to a lesser percent? Because eventually we will be doing Roosevelt Road and those roads, and that'll be the time that we'll assess those folks. So there's a couple different ways that cities can do those assessments with access points and things like that, but we're at least doing it road by road with properties that specifically are on that. So as we in the future head into Roosevelt and some of those roads, that's when those folks will experience the improvement in the 9750 assessment. Again, for David, for John, for myself, we really do appreciate the time and the communication and the connectivity on this, and we'll certainly be in touch as we get closer to this project. Thanks a lot, everybody, for being a part of it tonight. Thanks.